a sheeple that's dead, and they just don't know it, and they're shuffling around like a zombie.
Well, let's hope that there's hope for those zombies.
Yeah. Well, there is, really. And the data that we've had over the past, I don't know, maybe a year and a half or so, has pointed me towards the conclusion that there actually is hope, and it is the hope that the zombies have by proxy through a gradual or general awakening that is actually one of the main fears. Not main fears, but a primary supporting fear that is driving the powers that be. So basically, in our work, they are really scared of something that is off-planet. We don't know what it is, and conjecture gets you any number of different reasons for them to be scared. And the fear words are huge relative to the powers that be in space. But a subset of that propels that fear is their view of the giant mass of humans and the potential that we may wake up ahead of schedule, if you will,
Yeah, well, of course, there are a lot of people who are working on finding out what is actually the case about our contact with other civilizations and with back engineering fallen UFOs or UFOs that have been brought down intentionally over the years. And, of course, we know that there are so many underground bases that are off limits to everybody, including the president, that you're shot on sight if you can make it that far.
Right.
That you have to wonder what's going on. And also, I'm sure you're aware that the government's building underground bases like
they might be useful, yes.
Yeah, hamburger stands flipping hamburgers.
Yeah, and it's not just a desire to keep the cement industry hale and hearty, yeah.
Right.
But yeah, if you track the cement usage, it's quite staggering what's been going on in the general general collapse of economies since Japan went south like 20 years ago. In spite of that, cement usage has just gone on a continual upward curve, and in these past few years has bent at the knee as though it was had a potential to go exponential. We know it can't. Cement is a very curious commodity or substance because it is a very expensive to produce relative to other materials like steel, for instance, although expensive to produce, is not as expensive as cement. But cement has the longer lifespan, is more malleable, and for a lot of different reasons is one of the underpinnings of our society, going all the way back to the Romans. But it has like a 10 times cost ratio relative to how far you can move it. So you're kind of constrained. You couldn't, for instance, decide to do a big project involving lots of cement in Australia or in Antarctica unless you're capable of producing it there. So that also tells you something about the centers of activity, in the sense that where suddenly there's new cement plants coming together, and these are indicated by spur lines off of railroads, usually bringing gravel. And so you can really track a lot of very interesting activity and where people are putting what. And you get some very curious questions forming when you look at some of this data and you say, why would anybody be building a cement plant capable of producing that level way up in the mountains there? It just doesn't make sense. And new rail lines for this purpose. So they really do expect something to occur. There's a lot of data we have around the underground words and the underground cities and the safety and surety and so on. But we've now entered into a stage where probably the last 3 years we've got a conscious level of contamination around those archetypes because so many people are catching wind of something and are wondering and discussing in a conscious way underground shelters and so on. Does that make sense?
Right.
So we've had to tend to discount what we're getting in under certain archetypes just because they've come to the level of conscious usage. So as we see, for instance, the forecast of the global revolution manifest with it starting to sweep around and evolve into something else, whatever we're going to call it when it's planetary, will also at that same time we're losing the ability to really peer into that archetype anymore because it'll become too discussed.
Right. Well, it's interesting what you said about the something out there that they're afraid of. As you said, there are a lot of different theories about what could be out there, and some people are saying that there are existing space wars going on that we are unaware of, and of course, there's a big.
Well, I'm kind of one of them.
Are you?
I mean, saying that I've seen some strange stuff up in the skies that I would not have give credence to unless I'd seen it with my own lying eyes.
Mm-hmm. It's not far-fetched. I mean, supposedly this has been going on long before we were even here on the planet. So,
even discounting that, just in the last 60 years, we've got a huge portion of our economy that went underground in the form of being part of the corporatocracy feeding into the military-industrial complex that went dark, and who knows what they've been able to accomplish in 60 years.
Oh, my gosh, yeah. Well, I've heard reports that the technology that exists is thousands of years ahead of anything that we're allowed to have here on the, in the sheet
but and that's a little misleading when you think about it, but look at this. If I can conceive, this is one of the thought experiments Buckminster Fuller used to do that was very productive, and his thing was the natural solution to a problem. And it was, if I can conceive of what I would like the natural solution to look like, then I can back engineer from that mental construct to see what I would have to go through to create it. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I've thought about in this process is that, once you get to a certain stage, you don't have to do welding anymore because you'll be able to instruct metals to grow together. And then you start thinking about it a little bit further, and you think, wait a second. You should be able to create composite products that are various different layers of various different types of material, again, in the same energetic form that you're using to not weld anymore. And then pretty soon it gets to the thought that, hey, maybe you could just, tell this big vat of titanium powder to liquefy itself and trot on over into that mold and then solidify and grow stuff, so to speak, so that you'd have, one of the advantages of that is you don't have to envision a huge number of people being in a production facility because they'll be able to just automate it beyond the ability of a lot of us to understand. Very much like the old cartoon stage where the Martian would show up and put down the little seeds, put water on them, and minions would spring up. It's just a technology we wouldn't understand, but it's one of the things that are far less away than 1,000 years.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, even right now on our present course, if we don't get a big kick in the butt, we're probably less than 100 years away from growing houses, probably virtually overnight.
Yeah. I'd say even closer than that if we're not interviewed
exactly. Yeah, if we can come through this with some semblance of a carry level of humanity and root out some of these secrets, then there you go. But our species has repeatedly been kicked into a state of amnesia. And this last time around, the powers that be used that amnesia to keep us all as shambies, ignorant shambies in the dark where they fed us their manure. And finally now it's gotten a bit too light, and we're seeing what they're shoveling towards us and saying we don't like it anymore.
Yeah, right, exactly. One of the things that you brought out in your report in the beginning, which I thought was really timely, was the potential for extreme or ongoing repression of thought forms and activities. And boy, you hit that one right on the head. You're aware of what's going on with the crackdown on internal terrorists in the United States?
Oh yeah. It's a natural response that we've seen highlighted for maybe 18 months now.
Mm-hmm. And of course, it's a matter of time before we're having to, be concerned about that. Maybe 5 minutes.
Yeah, it'll come in fairly fast. But hey, there's some sort of good news here. Okay. We're looking at if we look at actually the year 2011. I was making notes and stuff here earlier. one of the things that we can clearly say is that somewhere in this year, as we progress forward, the powers that be and the rest of us are going to hit a fulcrum, and the little teeter-totter that we're on will tip the other way. And so it's kind of a race as to how far we get along that fulcrum, with the powers that be trying to pull us all back and doing everything they can to keep that one side down in their favor, right? Mm-hmm. The one of the things that may kick that fulcrum right out from underneath the whole little teeter-totter arrangement here is what's going on relative to the currencies and its timing relative to the onset of the global revolution, because we have within our data temporal markers that indicate that the revolution is going to end up freeing data and information as well as humanity, basically. And if that proceeds fast enough, and we've seen how fast it can go once you've got the modern technology and your Facebook and Twitter behind it all, and you have some impelling information that gets you over your emotional barriers that are keeping your butt glued to your couch, right? Right. Now, in Egypt, they had some very interesting internal dynamics, because their cost for food for everyone is relatively high, one of the highest on the planet. And I think it was maybe 40% of available daily resources needed to go to food, whereas in the United States it's like 13%. And what you bought for food is immaterial. It was just an average for the population. Mm. However, the United States, that 13% is probably closer to 18% since the onset of just this last year in the hyperinflation that the Fed's producing, and probably within a very short period of time, certainly by the 25th of March, we're going to get to a period where inflationary impacts on everything within the borders of the U.S. will start taking on a compounding effect. It's going to get really weird, because according to our data and the way we see the systemic just